All right, now you're recording.
Okay, I think we got it.
All right, thank you.
All right, welcome. Thank you for joining me for our discussion about managing diabetes, turning food into energy. Let me just get myself together here so I can get to the next slide. Um, as always, we're going to talk about how you can manage diabetes, how your care provider can, or how you can assist somebody that you know who has diabetes. The information that I'm sharing is general information. You know that I'm not a healthcare professional. And if you have specific questions about diabetes, obviously you should be addressing those to your primary care physician. This is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to really get into a discussion of what diabetes is, the difference between type 1 and type 2, what causes diabetes, how it's diagnosed, complications that come with diabetes, prevention. We'll get a little bit into glucose monitoring. I'd love to offer you all a snack, but I will show you a recipe that's good for somebody with diabetes. We'll talk about maintaining safe blood sugar levels, and we'll get a little bit into talking about a healthy eating plan, but that's pretty much going to be more of next week. All right, diabetes. It's a disease, and it makes it very difficult for your body to convert food into energy. You know, when you eat food, it converts to glucose, and glucose is the energy the body needs. In order to understand diabetes, it's helpful to know a little bit about the digestion process, the function of your pancreas and insulin, and how these things relate to diabetes. So here's just a picture of the organs that are involved in the digestion process, your salivary glands. When you eat food, it goes through your esophagus to your stomach. We're going to talk a little bit about the pancreas, and you can see where that's located. And so let's move forward and talk about glucose. Some of the food we eat, sugar, starch, and other carbohydrates, when you eat them, it's broken down in the digestion process into a sugar. It's a simple sugar, and it's called glucose. Glucose is absorbed into your bloodstream from your stomach. So when you eat sugar, starch, carbohydrates, what happens, your stomach digests it, and it puts sugar into your bloodstream. It's also known as blood sugar. So when you eat these things, your blood sugar will rise. Glucose means fuel. It's the same thing as fuel. Insulin is the same thing as a transporter. For the cells of your body to use the glucose as a fuel, it needs the help of insulin. So when you digest food and your stomach releases glucose into the bloodstream, the glucose floats around in your bloodstream. And if it weren't for insulin, it would stay in your bloodstream. Insulin is a hormone. It's produced by the pancreas. It's a small gland located behind your stomach, and you can see in this image where the pancreas is. And insulin helps blood glucose get from the bloodstream into the cells. Once the glucose gets in the cells, the glucose is burned and it gives your body energy. So that's the really important job of insulin. It gets glucose out of your blood and into your cells. Glucose in the body can be compared to gasoline in a car. Gasoline is a fuel, glucose is a fuel, and they're a source of energy. Gasoline, if you put gas in your car, that's not enough to make the car move, right? You need more than gas. What you need is a key to start the motor, and that allows the gasoline to be converted to energy to make your car move. So insulin is the key our bodies need to use glucose for energy. It opens the door to allow glucose to pass from the bloodstream into the cells. And once the glucose gets into the cells can use the glucose to produce energy for the body. Now, if you look at this slide, it shows you how your body controls blood sugar. Over on the right-hand side, there's your stomach, and you've eaten food, and your stomach's converting food to glucose. Down below the stomach is the pancreas. As the glucose goes into the bloodstream, the pancreas makes insulin. If we go over to the left side, you can see an artery, and the little blue dots in the artery are glucose, and the little yellow dots are insulin. And if you go down below to this lower circle, you can see this is a cell. The lower part of that circle, that yellow part, is a cell, and it has little doors. And insulin opens the doors so that glucose can go into the cell. For people with diabetes, insulin is not able to pass glucose from the bloodstream into the cells for one of two reasons. For some people, the pancreas doesn't produce enough insulin. That is diabetes type 1. For other people, the insulin is produced, but the body can't use it efficiently. So you have insulin, but it's really not working very well. That's diabetes type 2. So if we look at the two different types of diabetes, in this first circle, you can see the artery, and in the artery are those little blue circles. That's glucose. But you can see there's no insulin. So that means that glucose can't get into the cell. That's diabetes type 1. Now, in the second circle on the far right, you can see the artery, blue, little blue circles. That's glucose. The yellow circles are insulin. They try to go down into the cell to open up the doors of the cell to let glucose in, but that doesn't work. The cells do not absorb glucose. So what is the result? If you don't have enough insulin in your blood, or your insulin's not working effectively, your blood's going to have very high sugar. And when that happens, a couple of symptoms of diabetes are you're going to need to urinate a lot, and you're going to have large amounts of sugar in your urine. Let me just admit somebody. Here comes Martha. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how diabetes got its name. The correct name for diabetes, which your doctor may use, is diabetes mellitus. The Greek word diabetes means to pass through, and the Latin word mellitus means sugar or honey. So diabetes is an inability of your body to pass sugar into your cells. Okay. What is the cause of diabetes? Truthfully, the exact cause is unknown. Type 1 diabetes, which requires insulin as medication, usually starts in childhood. My younger sister, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 13. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease, and the body's immune system, your antibodies, basically attack the pancreas and kill the pancreatic cells so they can't produce insulin anymore. So most of us who are seniors are not prone to type 1 diabetes. What we're prone to is type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is not an autoimmune disease. It tends to run in families, and it may start as a result of being overweight, lack of exercise, your diet, and some lifestyle habits or other illnesses can cause diabetes type 2. One question people often ask is, why is diabetes type 2 more common in people who are overweight? And it definitely is more common in people who are overweight. If you have a lot of excess body fat, what happens, the fat interferes with your body's ability to use insulin. Your body does produce insulin, but the fat makes you resistant to having that insulin work. And this resistance prevents the body from moving glucose from the blood into the cells of the body. So glucose will build up in the blood because the body can't use it. It's not getting into the cells. There's important differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, if you have type 1, no question about it, you will need a daily supplement of insulin every single day, probably 3 times a day. The majority of people who get type 2 diabetes, and you tend to get it later in life, may initially, when they first get diagnosed, not need extra insulin to control the disease. However, if you get diabetes type 2 and your blood sugar levels are not controlled with diet, with exercise, or oral medications, then you too will probably eventually need insulin injections. How do you know if you have diabetes? Some people with diabetes have no symptoms at all, while other people have all of the following. One of the first signs that you might be a diabetic type 2 is extreme tiredness and extreme thirstiness. Other symptoms are having to get up at night and frequently urinate. Now, I have to get up at least twice a night. I mean frequently, more frequently than that. Blurry vision or changes in your vision. If you have this appetite, this hunger, and you eat and you eat and you still feel hungry. If you suddenly start losing weight and you're not trying to lose weight. If you feel numbness in your fingers, in your feet. And if you start to notice frequent infections of your skin, your gums, your bladder, like if you're having, or your vagina, if you're having yeast infections. If you get sores or cuts on your feet and you're noticing they don't heal and they form ulcers, another symptom of diabetes. How do we diagnose diabetes? Typically, to diagnose it, you need a blood test. So that you would go to your doctor, they would give you a blood test, and they would be able to diagnose it. Once you've been diagnosed, you can monitor diabetes at home with different types of tests. There's a test called A1C, and you may have all heard of it. It is a blood test, and A1C measures your average blood sugar level over the past 2 or 3 months. So if you are a diabetic type 2, you're probably going to be seeing your doctor every 3 months or so, and your doctor's going to take a blood sample, check your A1C to see what your average blood sugar level is. Now, here's a chart that shows you different A1C scores, starting with 5 at the very bottom and going all the way up to 7. If your A1C score is 5 to like 5.8, you probably don't have diabetes. If you're seeing a score of 6 to 6.4, maybe 6.6, you are pre-diabetic. You don't have diabetes, but you have a probability of getting it. If you're seeing scores of 6.8 or 7, you have diabetes. So one of the goals of diabetes self-management is to keep your A1C score below 7. So the reason you get these blood tests done on a regular basis is to help you know what your A1C is. So A1C results range from about 4 to 16. So the A1C is a test that your doctor uses to help you monitor your diabetes. It lets the doctor know how well your program is working to control your diabetes, your diet, your exercise, or your medication. Let's talk a little bit about complications from diabetes, because typically a person doesn't die from diabetes type 2, they die from complications of diabetes type 2. Diabetes is the 7th leading cause of death in the United States and a major cause of heart disease and stroke. Diabetes can cause serious health complications if blood sugar levels are not managed well over time. What kind of complications are caused by diabetes? You can have complications that affect your brain, your eyesight, your nerves, your heart, your kidneys, and let's talk more specifically about them. Most complications with diabetes type 2 are related to damage that's done to your blood vessels and nerves throughout your body. And this damage of blood vessels can lead to heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, loss of vision, pain of loss of feeling in your feet, and very slow healing of wounds and infections. And many of you may have heard of diabetic peripheral neuropathy, and this is where the nerves in your feet die. And you can see this progression here. If you look at the very top, you can see eventually your skin cells die and they get black, and you totally lose sensation in your feet, and you start to have circulation problems. This chart, the way you read it is, the blue is complications of a diabetic. The red is complications of a non-diabetic. So if you look at eye damage, there's no red. So most people who are aging don't get eye damage. But if you're a diabetic type 2, 18.9% of you will have eye damage. Let's look at chronic kidney disease. About 6.1% of the population who doesn't have diabetes will get chronic kidney disease. But look at this. If you have diabetes type 2, 27.8% will get chronic kidney disease. And you can go on down the list here. You can see that down the bottom, heart attack, the average aging population, 1.8% of us may have a heart attack. But if you have diabetes type 2, you increase the odds that you're going to have a heart attack. So the big issue for a diabetic type 2 is complications. Diabetes type 2, unfortunately, is a growing epidemic in our country. And like most chronic diseases, diabetes does not happen overnight. It doesn't happen quickly. You don't just suddenly wake up and have it. It happens slowly over time. And there are many people who have a condition which we call pre-diabetes. That means that your blood sugar levels are higher than normal, but not high enough to be diagnosed with diabetes. And we have an epidemic of pre-diabetes in this country. About 75 million Americans, which is 35% of the population of people over 20 years of age, currently have pre-diabetes. And the incidence of pre-diabetes in this country is on the rise. Prevention. If you get diagnosed with pre-diabetes, it's an early warning sign. And the good news is, if you maintain a healthy weight, if you keep yourself physically active, you can reverse pre-diabetes and you can delay or even prevent the development of type 2 diabetes. Some of the risks of diabetes, like if you have a brother, a sister, or a parent with diabetes, that can't be changed. So there are some people who are genetically predisposed to diabetes type 2, and there's nothing they can do about that. But for most of us, the risks can be reduced if we have healthy eating, regular exercise, and we control our weight. And I'm not talking about losing 50 or 100 pounds. Sometimes just losing 5 or 10 pounds can stop or slow the development of diabetes. Let's talk a little bit about blood glucose monitoring. home blood glucose monitoring. What is it? Basically, if you've been diagnosed with prediabetes or diabetes type 2, you are going to want to monitor to check what your blood sugar levels are. And it's pretty easy to do. Usually you just need a small drop of blood, you need some glucose strips, and you need a little meter. And what you do is you prick your finger, you put the blood on the strip, you stick the strip in this little meter, and it will read your blood sugar level. The meter is about the size of the cell phone, so you can carry it anywhere you go. You can bring it in your car, you can check your blood sugar at home, at work, or anywhere else. Now there are, if you don't really want to have to prick your finger, there are many new devices. They're called continuous glucose monitoring. And what they have is they have like a little sensor, and you put it on your upper arm. It sticks a little needle into your the muscle in your arm. And what you do is you put either a smartphone or a sensor, you scan the little thing in your arm, and it will read what your blood sugar is. So it's painless, and you don't have to go around sticking your finger with blood. Now, some of the cons of it can be a little bit expensive depending on your insurance policy. Most commercially insured patients will pay between $40 and $75 a month for 14-day sensors. And the sensors have to get replaced. You have to take the thing off your arm and replace it about every 14 days. And every once in a while, you have to check your sensor to make sure that it's reading correctly. The good news is you can scan your blood sugar even through your clothing. It's painless, it's easy to wear, it's water resistant, so you can swim, you can shower, or you can exercise. So if you're a diabetic type 2, you might want to look into getting one of these little devices. Now, let's talk about blood sugar levels. Blood sugar levels will often change throughout the day and the night. They don't stay stable. They're like blood pressure. You know that your blood pressure goes up and down. So what you want to do, if you're a care provider for somebody with diabetes, or if you have diabetes, you want to learn how is your blood sugar affected by eating, exercise, medications, stress, illness, and infections. And that's why it's incredibly important to monitor your blood sugar on a regular basis. Checking your blood sugars gives you and your doctor more flexibility in making decisions about how to control your blood sugar levels. Checking your blood sugar will help you evaluate and take action if your blood sugar is too high or too low. Some people ask, well, how often do I need to check my blood sugar? First of all, this is something you want to discuss with your doctor. So it really depends on how you and your healthcare team are going to use the information. There's no point in checking your blood sugar on a regular basis if you're not going to do anything with the information. My husband has a friend, he was a member here of the Council on Aging, and he just passed away this weekend, a diabetic type 2. He would check his blood sugar, but he never did anything with the information. So remember, when you're checking your blood sugar, it's not treatment. It's used to give you information so you can make changes. So you may want to monitor your blood sugar as often as several times a day, or as little as once a week. If you are taking insulin injections more than one a day, or if you're using an insulin pump, you need to monitor at least 3 times a day. Now, there's a few times when it's especially important to check your blood sugar. When you start a new medication. Obviously, if you start a new medication, you want to make sure that it's working. So you need to check your blood sugar to see if it's helping control your blood sugar medications, your blood sugar levels. If you change the dose of medication, sometimes your doctor will see that your blood sugar is still high and they'll increase the medication dosage. You want to check your blood sugar again to see if it works. And anytime you feel like your blood sugar is really high or really low, and when you're sick, you need to check your blood sugar. Let's talk about what are good blood sugar levels. First of all, everybody's different. As you know, we're all individuals. So talk to your doctor about what are good blood sugar levels for you. But typically, for most of us, before you have a meal, so in other words, when you get up in the morning and you haven't eaten for 12 hours, blood sugar would be somewhere between 70 and 130 milligrams per deciliter. That's normal and healthy. Then let's say you've had lunch. Obviously, when you eat food, what's happening? Your body's making blood sugar. It's putting blood sugar into your blood. So after meals, it's going to be higher, but you don't want it to be over 180 milligrams per deciliter. Here's things to keep in mind. Blood sugar naturally rises and falls during the course of the day. It's usually low in the morning when you wake up and highest an hour or two after you eat. So here gives you an example. Here's a person who's over 20. They get up in the morning, their blood sugar is less than 100 before a meal. And you can see this is you can see that the blood sugar changes during the course of the day. But overall, it's normal, and their A1C is 7, which is normal. Okay. So your target range, if you're a diabetic type 2, is from a low of 70 first thing in the morning to a high of 180 after meals. So you don't want to worry if it fluctuates as long as you stay within this range. I want to talk a little bit about the dawn effect. Let's say you have diabetes type 2 and you've been managing it, you exercise, you're trying to eat healthily, and you get up in the morning and you check your blood sugar and it's high. You may go to bed and your blood sugars are normal, and you find in the morning it jumps up. Many people suffer from this. It's known as the dawn effect or the dawn phenomenon. Blood sugars may rise a few hours before getting up in the morning in response to release of hormones and extra glucose from the liver. Your liver stores about a 24-hour supply of blood sugar, and your body kind of knows when the sun is rising and when you're going to get up. And what does it do? It releases a lot of blood sugar for some people when they get up in the morning, because they know that you're going to need that. The body knows you're going to need it for energy. So to prevent or correct high blood sugar levels in the morning, your doctor will do some blood testing, and he may recommend, or she may recommend, when you go to bed, no carbohydrates close to bedtime, like no cookies, chips, things like that. They may adjust your medication, give you more medication, or they may put you on insulin, or just totally switch you to a different medication. So if you notice that, you do need to talk to your doctor about it. So let's talk about how, as a diabetic, you can maintain safe blood glucose levels. And we have 3 pictures here. On the far left, we have an artery, and you can see the red blood cells, and see all those white dots? That's sugar. That's too much sugar in the blood, called hyperglycemia. In the next circle, we see the hemoglobin in the artery, and we see some sugar. That's normal. You need sugar in your blood. Your body needs sugar for energy. And in the next third circle, we see only 2 dots of sugar. That's not enough sugar. That's called hypoglycemia. Let's talk about these. The goal of diabetes management is to keep your sugars in that target range, 70 to 180. Sometimes your blood sugar may get really, really high, 200, 230, 250. When it gets high, it's called hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia, 130 if you haven't eaten for 8 hours, 180 2 hours after eating. That's called hypoglycemia. What's going to happen to you when you have hypoglycemia? You're going to be so tired you can't move off the couch. So thirsty, no matter what you drink, it doesn't quench your thirst. You may have blurry vision. You're going to be hungry, and you're going to need to pee a lot. Those are symptoms of hyperglycemia. On the other hand, sometimes your blood sugar gets too low. That's called hypoglycemia. And that's when it's less than 70 milligrams per deciliter. What happens then? You'll feel sweaty, shaky, dizzy. You'll have a hard, fast heartbeat. You'll get a headache. Because why? Remember, your brain needs sugar to function. If there's no sugar, your brain's not going to function. You're going to get a headache. You're going to get confused. You may have a total change in mood, tingling around your mouth and fingers. My sister, who's a diabetic type 1, I've been with her many times when she's had hypoglycemia, and she'll get aggressive, totally irrational. It's very scary. Okay, the causes of hyper, too much sugar, and hypo, not enough sugar, are all caused by the following things: too little or too much medication or insulin. So the first thing, if you find that you're hyper or hypoglycemic, is you want to get your medications checked to make sure they're working. If you eat at irregular hours or you miss or skip meals, one of the most important things if you're diabetic is to eat at regular times, so your body gets used to when you're going to have sugar in your bloodstream. If you eat too little, not a lot, not enough, or you eat too much, especially carbohydrates, this can cause hypo or hyperglycemia. Alcohol. You can drink alcohol if you're a diabetic type 2 or have pre-diabetes, but you can't drink too much. So drinking too much alcohol can cause you to become hypoglycemic. If you increase or decrease your physical activity, again, it's really important for a diabetic type 2 to be in a routine for eating and a routine for exercise. If you all of a sudden become a weekend warrior and go climb a mountain and you haven't done that before, you may see that you become hypoglycemic. Certainly when you get sick, you have an illness, an infection, or surgery, it affects your sugar levels. Emotional stress. Somebody that you love passes away and you're under a lot of emotional stress as a diabetic, it can cause you to become hypoglycemic. If you have diabetes, really important, wear an emergency bracelet or carry an emergency card in your wallet. Because let's say you're at Hobbs Community Center, you're in a bone builders class, and you're becoming hypoglycemic. You're feeling dizzy, you're getting a headache. The staff there are not going to know how to help you. They're not going to know what's wrong. They may think you're dehydrated, but if they see you've got your diabetes bracelet on, they're going to better know how to help you. Also, if you're diabetic, always carry a remedy food with you or a fast-acting carbohydrate. So, for example, you're at Bone Builders, you're getting hypoglycemia, low sugar. You want something in your pocketbook or handy that you can take quickly to raise your sugar levels back up again. Typically, fruit juice is a really good idea, a sugar cube. You can buy things from the pharmacy, they're expensive, that's not necessary, but something that's going to put sugar into your bloodstream really fast. Let's talk about healthy eating plans. This is the hardest part of diabetes. Healthy eating is the core of diabetes self-management. The bottom line is if you have diabetes, you are the only one who can manage your blood sugar. Your doctor can't do it. You are the one who has to do it. Now, I'm not suggesting you can't eat or you have to go hungry. I am also not suggesting that you need special food different from anybody else. You can still eat the foods you like and love. But if you have diabetes, you've got to be more careful than other people about when you eat, how much you eat at one sitting, and what types of food you eat in combination. And that's because the type of the food, the timing of when you eat food, and the amount you eat all affect your blood sugar. All foods, everything you eat affects your blood sugar. However, carbohydrates are the nutrients that do the most to determine blood sugar levels. So what are carbohydrates? Anything made out of grain, breads, cookies, pizzas, fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates. These crackers, potato chips, most fast foods, those are carbohydrates, okay? So let's look at this chart. The way you read the chart is, see the blue line? And down the bottom it says 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. Well, this is a measure of how fast a food affects your blood sugar. The dark blue line is carbohydrate. So you can see when you eat a carbohydrate, within 2 hours, your blood sugar skyrockets when you eat carbohydrates. Now look at the purple line, that's protein. When you eat protein, your blood sugar does go up about 4 hours after you eat it, but not as much as carbohydrate. Now look at fat. When you eat fat, like protein, at about 4 hours, your blood sugar will rise, but very, very little. So you can clearly see that the foods that affect your blood sugar are carbohydrates. So because carbohydrates affect your blood sugar so greatly, your job is to monitor your carbohydrates, especially refined carbohydrates, processed foods. How do you do this? One way you do it is by learning about the carbohydrate content in different foods. You want to eat healthier foods that have less carbohydrates in them. If you're going to eat with carbohydrates, you want to watch your portion size, and you want to know how many carbs are in a portion of food. If you do things like eat lots of vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, these foods give you good nutrients. They give you energy, fiber, fewer calories, less fat, and fewer carbohydrates. So these are good foods to eat if you're a diabetic. You can eat all these delicious snack foods like pizza and onion rings and burgers and popcorn and all this good stuff, but you've got to limit your portion size. These are the foods that raise your blood sugar levels. They add fat and calories, and they don't give you healthy nutrients. These are the foods, we call them high glycemic load. So white bread, Coke, ice cream, cornflakes. See, those are your high glycemic load. The one in red, they raise your blood sugar levels up so fast. It's really hard for insulin to get all that sugar out of your blood. Lower glycemic foods like lentils and beans and hummus and peanuts, you can eat them, doesn't raise your blood sugar so fast. So I'm not saying that you can never have a chocolate chip cookie or foods that you love if you're a diabetic, but you need to limit them. You need to eat them in moderation. What does moderation mean? At each meal, you don't want more than 60 grams of carbohydrate. So you can eat carbohydrates somewhere between 45 and 60 grams. So like this weekend was my granddaughter's birthday, obviously we're eating cake. So let's decide, you decide to eat cake. You want to look up cake, you can Google it or get a book, and I'll talk about that next week. And you might find that a big piece of cake has 40 grams of carb in it, right? So if you've had 40 grams of carb, how many grams of carbohydrate do you have left for that meal? 20. So that means no potato chips, right? Eat something like a hamburger without the bun, or have a salad, and you'll be okay, and you can enjoy that piece of cake. So remember, as a diabetic, if you're taking care of a diabetic, if you are a diabetic, moderation is the key to successful management of blood sugar. You don't have to stop eating the foods you eat, but you need to control and monitor when and how much of them you eat. Here's a really good snack if you're a diabetic. This is, and I will send you the recipe if you don't already have it. It's a turkey salad with spinach and tomatoes and peppers, a little onion. And I made the dressing with a little bit of orange juice, a little olive oil and salt and pepper. It's delicious. And if you look at the bottom here, you can see that it has 193 calories, one serving, 22 grams of protein, 2 grams of fiber, 12 grams of carbohydrate, right? So that's within a reasonable range. It has 8 grams of fat. So that would be a really good lunch to have if you're a diabetic type 2. So I hope this introduction to managing diabetes has been informative to you. I'll join you next week and we'll talk more about diabetes. I'll really get into detail about talking about eating, about exercise. I'll talk about the different types of medications your doctor might recommend if you're diabetic, what the pros and cons of those are, and talk about how you can live as healthy as possible with diabetes. So thank you for joining me today. Sarah will be sending you an article. It's a pretty long article, but it says everything I said today to you. She'll also send you the recipe for the salad. And at the end of next week's session, we'll send you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. So thank you everybody for joining me. It's been a real pleasure. I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Okay. And you can go up to go to your stop record.
Stop record, pause, stop recording.
Yep.